Hi everyone and welcome. This is Mindy Egan, and in today's video I'm going to show you how I'm taking the same stencil using the same colors, but I'm going to get two completely different looks. The products that I'm going to be using today is the Color Layering Tulip Stencil. This also does have a coordinating cover plate. I have the Smile Friend Stamp and Cut XL, and then the I Appreciate You stamp set. So I'll start with the color layering stencil. Now this is a 4-piece stencil. It's going to layer together to create a gorgeous tulip background, and tulips are one of my favorite flowers, so I absolutely love this stencil. Down in the bottom left-hand corner is going to be a 1, 2, 3, and 4, so you know the order that it can be stenciled in. And there is also a coordinating cover plate that I will talk more about later. So to start my background, I just have a piece of grid paper here that I taped down to my work surface, and I put a little bit of repositionable tape down in the center, and that's going to hold my white cardstock in place. Then I'm going to take the first layer of the stencil, I'm going to line it up over my white cardstock and hold that down with a low tack tape. The first color I'm going to start with is going to be Cherry Ink, and as I add the second layer of the tulips, I'm going to add a darker shade, which is going to help give it dimension. So I started out with the Cherry Ink and a blending brush, and I'm going to blend this all the way across the front of the card, making sure to go in a left to right and right to left motion. I also want to make sure that I'm adding ink to those squares that are up in the top and bottom corners. Those are your registration marks, and they're going to help you so that you can have easy alignment with the other layers of the stencil. So I removed the bottom piece of tape, but I did not remove the top because I thought since I already had the ink out and the stencil, I thought I would create a second card, but this time I would be using sand cardstock, which is kind of like a craft cardstock, and it's going to give me almost a whole different look to this. So I had just flipped my stencil up, kind of creating that hinge, placed my sand cardstock down over my grid sheet I have there, and I still have some repositionable tape down, so it's holding my cardstock in place. Using that same color of ink, the Cherry Ink, I'm going to go back over the stencil. So when I remove this first layer, you're going to see it's going to give it a more muted tone to it. Now I'm bringing in the second layer of the stencil. I lined up those squares in the top and bottom corners and holding my stencil down in place with that same tape. And now for my second color, this one is Raspberry Jam. So it's almost like a reddish purple. It is very beautiful when layered over the top of cherry. And I am using a small blending brush to go over all of those areas and really get into some of those small detailed parts. So after that's all blended in, I'm going to remove the bottom piece of tape, leave that one up on top to create my hinge, and then I can bring in the white piece of cardstock. Now, every now and then you might need to do some slight adjusting just because I don't know if we'll ever get it perfectly lined back up in the same exact position every time. So just to double check your stencil, look at where it is lining up over your previously blended area and just shift that over a little bit if you need to. So this one, again, I'm bringing in the Raspberry Jam. Now you're going to notice it stand out a lot more on the white cardstock than you are the sand. The sand just provides a different look to your card front, even though I'm using the same exact colors. It's because it has that brown undertone to it. But here on the white, it really stands out. I removed that stencil, brought in the third layer of the stencil, which is going to be the base color for my leaves. I thought I would try something different and a little fun. This is going to be Paradise Ink. So it has more of a teal tone to it. So I'm blending that on. This is, like I said, that base layer. So this is layer number 3, the base layer of the leaves, blending over the entire portion of this or all of those open areas of the stencil using my blending brush. And I am going fairly light-handed. Once I remove the bottom piece of tape, I can bring in my sand cardstock. This looks super light on the white, but I think it looks amazing. You could even leave it as that and not even add the last layer of the leaves. So it does have a lot of potential to it. So bringing in the sand once again, I lined that up. I'm going to hold that stencil down with my tape, and I'm going to use this Paradise ink over the sand background. Again, it's going to give it a very muted tone and almost kind of change the color of it because we have that base color of craft underneath. Again, still very beautiful and could just be left as that. Now, if you want to add your fourth layer, I'm going to line that up again, just kind of shift it if you need to make sure that all the areas are lined up with your base layer of the leaves, and then holding that down with the tape. Now, my darker shade is going to be Bermuda. Again, it is kind of a dark teal ink, super gorgeous. Once I have that whole panel blended, I can remove that bottom portion, flip that up with my hinge. Love how that turned out. So I'm going to bring in the white cardstock, line that up, shift my stencil if I need to make sure everything is lined up accordingly. See here, I did decide I needed to adjust that. So I just removed the tape, adjusted it as needed, and then taped it back down. So here I can bring in that same color, that Bermuda ink, going over the detail areas of the leaves. Then as I finish that and remove the tape to remove this last layer of the stencil, I'll show you the beautiful background that it created. And I really enjoyed using the Paradise and Bermuda ink. I think it was a nice change up, and the tone just suited the card really well. So here are my two backgrounds. Same exact stencil, same exact colors, but almost two different vibes or feelings that the card gives off. Now, if you want to, you can take the coordinating cover plate, line that up with your tulips, and you can die cut out all of those tulips, and then you can make your own arrangement on the front of your card. I'm not going to use that today. I'm going to keep these as a full panel. I'm taking both of these panels and I'm trimming off about 1/4 of an inch from each edge. So it's going to end up measuring 3 3/4 by 5 1/2. Now, of course, I can't resist adding splatters, so I brought in my splat box, and I'm starting out with the white iridescent shimmer spray. I just shook that up really well, took the top off, and added the splatters to that background. Now, it does add a beautiful shimmer, but it just wasn't popping enough off of the front of the card with the sand base. So I brought in some white ink, diluted that with a little bit of water, and added those splatters with my paintbrush. And I'm going to do the same thing on my white panel. This one is the white iridescent shimmer spray once again, but instead of white splatters, I'm going to bring in the gold glimmer metallic ink. So I'm going to put these panels off on the side, let them dry, and I'm going to work on a sentiment for both of the cards. For this, I am bringing in the stamp set, I Appreciate You. There is some really great encouraging sentiments on there, and I'm going to need to do these in 2 different colors of cardstock. So for one, I am going to be using white cardstock for the sentiment strip. I like to use my Misty ruler to help align that straight. It just makes my cutting easier if I was going to trim it with a paper trimmer. So for this one, I am using my pitch black ink to stamp that down. And this has a really beautiful, clean font to it. And I'm going to stamp just gently. I'm not going to apply a ton of pressure because I don't want to risk distorting those letters. And I'd rather just put less pressure and stamp again versus applying too much pressure. Now with my other card, I decided to go with a black strip sentiment. So I have some extra pieces here of black cardstock. I lined up the sentiment. I'm going to prep it with an anti-static powder tool. And then I'm going to ink up the sentiment in the Unicorn Pigment ink. This is my favorite way to do white sentiments when I'm heat embossing. Again, just kind of stamping gently, coming in and stamping again if I need to. So because I used the white pigment ink, it's really going to help the white embossing powder stand out. I feel like I get a cleaner embossing when I do this. So I brought in some scratch paper, sprinkled on my white embossing powder, tapped off the excess, and then I can have my heat tool warming up on the side. Once that's nice and hot, I kind of start from the back, give it a quick pass, and then bring it to the front and melt the embossing powder. I decided instead of trimming this out with my paper trimmer, I am going to use this die from the Message Strips stamp set. It's going to give me a really nice clean edge. They also fit really well over my sentiments. So I die cut those out to give me my two sentiments. Off screen, I did a little die cutting. I took the word smile and I die cut it 3 times from the pitch black cardstock. And I'm going to layer this together with my liquid glue, just adding some dots on the back of it. If I need to, I can tap off that excess with my finger, or sometimes I will bring in a paper towel and dab a little bit of that off if I just get a little bit too much glue on there. And then I'm going to layer these up using my tweezers to help align everything and kind of squeeze everything together to make sure it is all lined up. For the front of the card, I have another piece of sand cardstock that is cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm adding a layer of cardstock that is cut to 4 by 5 1/2. And it's going to give me just a little bit of an edge on each side. I like changing up my card designs every now and then, or the layouts of my cards. So I thought this one would be really fun, just leaving the border on the edges. Now for the other card, I have white cardstock as the base, and then added sand as that inside panel. I'm going to pop up my blended panels for dimension, and instead of using foam tape, I decided to try out some craft foam. So I trimmed these to be about the size of my ink blended panel, which is 3 3/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm adding my liquid glue all around the very edge of that craft foam and then also in the center. And I'm adding that to the back of my blended panels. I'll press that together nicely, making sure that that foam is hidden behind my panel. And then I can flip that over, add some liquid glue to the back of that, and place it onto my card front. Now for adding dimension, if you want to do that, you can use scratch pieces of cardstock, you can use foam tape. I have this craft foam that I wanted to try out, and I let the cards sit for a few days and came back and checked it because sometimes I feel like things can peel up after a while. And this actually is holding together really well. Nothing is curling up. I had made sure to put my liquid glue right to the very edges, so this actually is holding up together really well, and I think I might be using craft foam for a little while. For my smaller sentiments, I cut some additional strips that were about the same size or a little bit smaller, and I layered those together as well to help give it some lift. I could have done the craft foam, but these were pretty skinny and I had some extra cardstock, so that worked out. Now this particular smile, I die cut out of the white cardstock, again layered it together to add that lift and dimension. Added my liquid glue, and then I am placing this down towards the bottom of my card front. I really wanted to show off the tulips, and I feel like sometimes I get in a rut. Like I create the same kind of card, which is always putting the sentiment in the center. So I thought just by shifting this down towards the bottom of the card front, just gave it a little bit of a different layout. So this card I was super happy with. I loved the white sentiments on top of that sand cardstock, but I wasn't really feeling it on this white card with the black smile. It just was almost too harsh. So I die cut out another word, smile, and I layered it on top and just slightly offset it. So it's going to give it just a hint of a shadow. And I really like how this turned out. So I really liked the white on white, but then the black in the back, I got some rhyming. The black in the back gave it some separation. So I really prefer how that came out. I hope you enjoyed today's card projects and found some inspiration in it, and maybe trying out some different colors of cardstock to do your ink blending. Thanks so much for joining. See you soon.